Why, Mira, why did you destroy me? I loved you. I would have given you everything. Can a woman rebuild her life with the man she once betrayed, now standing before her as both a lover and enemy? Will the truth they've hidden for years bring them healing or tear them apart forever? But before we start, let us know where you're watching from. If you like this story, please guys, subscribe to Story Storer, hit the bell icon, and if there is something you dislike, please comment below and let us know. Thank you. The machines beeped frantically, their high-pitched alarms piercing the suffocating silence. Nurses rushed in, moving swiftly around the frail woman lying on the hospital bed. Her pale face was etched with pain, her eyes fluttering as she struggled to stay awake. She reached out, her fingers trembling, until they found the warm, familiar hand of her mother. Mom. Her voice was a fragile whisper, barely escaping her cracked lips. Promise me, you'll find happiness. Tears streamed down the older woman's face as she squeezed her daughter's hand. Don't talk like that, Aisha. You're going to be fine. You're strong, my love. You'll make it. Aisha's lips curled into a faint smile, a heartbreaking mixture of hope and resignation. I know, my time is short, but you've spent your life taking care of me, all alone. You deserve love, Mom. I want you to remarry. The words hung heavy in the air, shocking her mother, Mira, to her core. Remarry at 50? The thought was inconceivable. Her world revolved around Aisha, her only child, her reason for living. But as she looked into her daughter's pleading eyes, she felt her heart shatter. For me, Mom, Aisha's voice wavered. I want to go, knowing you're not alone. Promise me, you'll give love another chance. Mira's vision blurred with tears, but she nodded, her heart breaking with every breath. I promise, my love. I promise. Aisha's grip loosened, her eyes drifting shut as the machines droned into a long, continuous beep. The room plunged into silence. In the days following Aisha's death, Mira's life became a haze of quiet sorrow. Her grief felt endless, but there was a part of her that couldn't help but remember Aisha's dying wish. She found herself haunted by the promise she had made. Mira's childhood friend, Carla, had been a constant presence in her life, especially during these difficult times. It was Carla who, with good intentions but little understanding of the depths of Mira's heartache, suggested a way for Mira to begin healing. You need someone, Mira. You can't live in the shadow of grief forever. Someone? Mira had scoffed bitterly. I have no room for anyone else. But Carla was persistent. I know someone who could make you happy. He's kind, stable, and I've heard nothing but good things about him. Why don't you at least meet him? Think of it as a chance to honor Aisha's memory. Reluctantly, Mira agreed, but she made it clear to Carla that it was a one-time meeting. She was not interested in falling in love again, especially not at her age. Still, Carla's words echoed in her mind. You deserve to be happy. Mira sat nervously at the cafe, her fingers tightly clutching the edges of her coffee cup. She hadn't wanted to be here, but Aisha's dying wish echoed in her mind. You deserve love, Mom. Promise me you'll try again. Mira had reluctantly agreed to the meeting, telling herself it was just a formality, nothing more. The door chimed, and Mira looked up, her heart skipping a beat. The man approaching her was tall, his steps steady, his face partially obscured by a hat. As he drew closer, her breath caught in her throat. It couldn't be. It wasn't possible. But it was. Standing in front of her, looking as if time had stopped for him, was Kian. Her Kian. The man she had once loved, the man she had left behind. His dark eyes locked onto hers, and for a brief moment there was a flicker of recognition, a spark of something old and painful. Mira, he said quietly, his voice betraying no emotion. But she saw it, the flicker of something darker beneath his calm exterior. The memories came rushing back, and Mira was paralyzed. The man she had promised herself to forget had returned, but this time he was no longer the man she remembered. The wedding day arrived. Mira stood at the back of the grand hall, her heart hammering in her chest as she tried to steady her breathing. The white flowers adorned the room, and the golden chandeliers cast a soft light over the elegantly dressed guests. But Mira's mind was elsewhere. She had thought she could handle this. She had thought that meeting Kian again would be nothing more than a formality, a final act to honor Aisha's memory. But now, standing in front of the altar, the reality of the situation was too overwhelming. Mira's gaze landed on Kian as he stood there, his face masked with composure. But his eyes were cold, unreadable. He was not the man she remembered, the warm, loving man who once filled her heart with joy. And then, as if on cue, their eyes locked. Kian's lips twitched into the smallest of smiles, but it was not a smile of affection. It was a smile of something darker. "Surprised?" Kian whispered, his voice low enough for only her to hear. "Did you think you could escape me that easily?" Mira's heart skipped a beat. Escape? Was that what he thought? Was this revenge? The ceremony continued, but Mira could hardly concentrate on the words being spoken. Every time she caught Kian's eye, she felt the pull of their past, the memories of a love that had been torn apart by secrets and fears. But now, as they stood there together, something felt different. Kian was playing a role, but what was it? After the vows, the guests moved to the reception hall. Kian, the charming groom, danced with guests, laughing and smiling. But every glance he gave Mira was filled with something far less friendly. His eyes were calculating, as though he were watching her, studying her every move. She caught herself several times staring at him, trying to understand what he was doing here. Was this truly a marriage of revenge, or had something deeper been left unresolved between them? The first dance was a blur. Mira felt the cold, steady grip of Kian's hand on her waist as they moved in sync across the floor. The music swirled around them, but all she could focus on was the distance between them, despite their proximity. His presence, once comforting, now felt like a weight she could barely carry. As they danced, Kian pulled her closer, his body pressing against hers, and for a fleeting second a rush of old warmth stirred in Mira's chest. But it was gone before she could hold on to it. His words, whispered in her ear, shattered any hope of reclaiming that lost intimacy. "Do you regret it?" Kian's voice was low, a dangerous edge in his tone. "Do you regret the way you tossed me aside?" Mira's heart twisted. How could she explain the truth? How could she tell him that her departure wasn't born of indifference, but fear? Fear of hurting him, of losing him, of being too weak to carry the weight of their love. She recoiled slightly, struggling to form a response. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered, voice shaking. "If you hate me so much, why marry me?" Kian's smile never reached his eyes. "To watch you suffer," he replied softly, "to see you trapped the way I was. Helpless." Days passed, and Mira couldn't ignore the strange shifts in Kian's behavior. His coldness remained, but occasionally she would catch glimpses of something tender. A soft look, a brief touch. It confused her. Was this part of his game? Was he trying to break her, or was there something more beneath the surface? One evening, after a harsh comment from Kian, Mira found him staring out the window, his posture rigid. There was an uncharacteristic tremble in his hands, and his face seemed paler than usual. It was as if the anger had slipped, leaving behind something more vulnerable, something broken. Mira approached, hesitant. "Kian?" He didn't respond, his gaze fixed on the distant night. But she saw the tension in his jaw, the pain in his eyes. For the first time since their reunion, Mira felt a flicker of doubt. Was there more to his coldness than revenge? It was late one stormy night when the dam finally broke. Kian, normally composed, stood by the window, his back to her, shaking with suppressed emotion. Mira watched him for a long moment before gathering the courage to approach. "Why, Mira?" Kian's voice cracked. "Why did you destroy me? I loved you." The raw pain in his words hit her like a punch to the gut. This wasn't just anger, it was heartbreak, the kind that ran deeper than she had ever known. Mira's heart clenched, but the truth was ready to spill. "I was pregnant," she whispered barely above a breath. "I lost our child, Kian. I couldn't bear the thought of you looking at me and seeing failure. I pushed you away because I thought you'd hate me." Kian's body stiffened. For the first time, she saw the shock in his eyes, genuine disbelief. "I never stopped loving you," he said, his voice trembling. "I never understood why you left." The confession hung in the air, their painful past laid bare. Mira finally saw that Kian's anger had always been born from the same place as her fear: love. The storm outside raged on, but inside, the air between Mira and Kian had shifted. For hours they talked, the walls they had built between them slowly crumbling. No more lies, no more hiding behind anger and bitterness, just raw truth. Kian held her tightly, his arms trembling as he whispered apologies, his voice thick with emotion. Mira felt the weight of the years they had lost, but also the fragile hope that began to grow between them. The past could never be erased, but they could rebuild, piece by piece. "I'm so sorry," Kian said, his voice cracking. "I never wanted to hurt you." Mira rested her head against his chest, the pain of the past finally starting to ease. "We both hurt each other," she whispered, "but maybe we can find our way back, together." In that quiet moment, they both knew it wasn't the end. It was a beginning. Weeks passed, and Mira and Kian slowly found their footing in the aftermath of their painful past. Healing was never easy, and there were still moments of doubt, lingering anger and tears, but they were no longer haunted by the ghosts of their former selves. They began to rebuild, one conversation at a time. Mira allowed herself to hope again, something she hadn't done in years. She learned to trust in the love she had once feared to lose, to believe that even after so much hurt, there was still a chance for happiness. Kian was no longer the man of her past, and neither was she, but together, they were something new, stronger, more whole. The promise she had made to Aisha had come full circle. Mira had found a new chance at love, not without scars, but with the possibility of peace. And in Kian's arms she knew they could move forward, together,